So good morning everyone. So today, as I said I had discussed in the last class of mine, after giving you the question paper pattern, that you need to have two books ready with you pertaining to English, isn't it? So you have two books, namely Reflections and Articles, isn't it? So this is my class number 2 after an introduction yesterday to English class. Today we have the first unit from your reflection. Okay, so the first unit, if you could see in your textbook, it is nothing but it's actually a prose by title The Gentleman of the Jungle. Okay, the prose is written by Jomo Kenyatta. Okay, so before I could start anything, first of all, let me tell you that before you read or before you comprehend any poem or any text or any prose, any short story or one act play in the reflections, first of all, we should understand what is the title of the lesson or a poem that you're reading and who is the author or a poet of that. Now, since this is a short story or this is a prose or a lesson, so to say, what you have read in your earlier classes. So here is an account of a small, very small story about the colonization. What it is all you will be getting to know slowly as I progress with doing the text. But before I go to the text, let me very clearly tell you that give all your attention to what is the title is all about and then who is the author. So this should be very clear in your mind. Okay, now what is the title that we are going to do today? We are going to do The Gentleman of the Jungle. Okay, so before even going to text or before even reading anything for that matter, okay, the moment when you read the title, don't you think something in your mind? Yeah, if I can ask you the questions about what exactly do you understand, what exactly do you think the moment you read a title like The Gentleman of the Jungle? Okay, there are certain things which you need to understand, get it cleared, and then only you can go further for the reading of the prose. Okay, clear? Okay, now today we are going to do The Gentleman of the Jungle. It is written by Jomo, I-O-M-O, Jomo. It's the pronunciation is given clearly in the text. You can see that, have a look at it. Jomo Kenyatta is the person who has written this short story. Okay, now let me clearly tell you, the moment when you read the title The Gentleman of the Jungle, be very, very specific here about the spelling. The is an article, isn't it? This can be a common noun, isn't it? Of is again a preposition. Again you have a article, direct article, then you have again a noun here. So any title, any sentence or any particular phrase in English will definitely comprise of the different parts of speech that it has, isn't it? What do we speak, what do we write, what do we listen, and what do we read? Obviously everything is in terms of written document, isn't it? You answer your papers in the examination after looking at the question paper. What are you doing? You are writing sentences. A sentence, if I have to ask you what is the definition of a sentence, you would clearly tell me that a sentence is nothing but a group of words which gives you a complete meaning or something, isn't it? So in the similar way, when you read the title here, there are 5 different words belonging to 5 different parts of speech been used. The moment you read the title, you may have one or the other thing in your mind, so that you are eager to answer, like this is what I thought, this is what I think, this is what could it mean. So you have your own ways of comprehending the moment you read this. But one more thing, be very, very specific. Not only to this lesson, anything that we do, please give your attention to understand the title, because the moment you understand the title, almost or some or the other way, you will be able to go into the text on par with what you have understood through the title. Okay, so let us understand in the perspective of what exactly are we going to discuss here. So this is a short story written by Jomo Kenyatta titled as The Gentleman. Look at the spelling here. The Gentleman, M-E-N is used here. It is not M-A-N. The Gentleman of the Jungle. No, it is not the Gentleman of the Jungle, but it is the Gentleman. What is the difference between gentleman and gentleman? You know it, right? So the plural form is used here about this noun, the gentleman of the jungle. Okay, you know what is a jungle? Nothing but a forest. Okay, so here we are going to read a story about the gentleman. So if I have to ask you what is the meaning of the word gentleman or gentleman, gentleman is a group of men, gentleman is one single person. So in your mind, the moment if you imagine a gentleman, how does he look like? So you have your own imaginations, isn't it? So you have seen gentlemen, gentlewomen, isn't it? In the similar way, today we are going to do something on the title, that is The Gentleman of the Jungle. So what are you expecting out of it? So you might think that, yeah, probably we are going to read about the gentlemen who belong to the jungle, right? Or there are group of people, there are group of men who are belonging to jungle, which has been written in this short story. Of course, these are the things that come into your mind the moment you think of the title here. So the title, if it is very clear with the pronunciation as well as the spelling, this is very, very important, because you need to use this the names of the titles or the names of the authors in your examination to fetch good marks. So that's the reason that you should be giving importance to what is the title, who is the author. In the similar way, you will also write the notes in the similar way about, you need to make a note of after each and every chapter or a lesson or a prose or a unit we complete. So as far as now, what I'm thinking is that probably you have understood what do you mean by the title or what does it mean. You can have your own perspectives also. It is not that it should be the thing that whatever I say is correct. No. You can also have your own ways and reviews to this, the title here, and then probably once we start doing it, slowly the things will come into your mind in the form of the proper understanding of the text. Okay, so let me start with the first unit that we have, the Gentleman of the Jungle. So before I could do something, let us know something more about who's Jomo Kenyatta. So on the page number 6 of your textbook, you have been given a brief note about who the author is or what the author is all about. So let us read that first and then we will come on to the title. All right? Yes. Jomo Kenyatta was born in the year 1893 and he was died in the year 1978. Was an African political leader. The moment you read the name, probably you might have guessed it that probably he is an African, or the name will give you a kind of a feeling to think that probably the man is from Africa. So he was the man who was born in the year 1893 and he was died in the year 1978, was an African political leader. So he was an African, okay, and he was also a political leader, first president of Kenya in the year 1964 to 1978. So furthermore, you will come to understand that he was also the president of the country Kenya for the year 1964 to 1978. Then a Kikuyu, K-I-K-U-Y-U, Kikuyu, he was one of the earliest and best known African nationalist leaders. As secretary of his tribal association in the year 1928, he campaigned for land reform and African political rights. So why am I reading is that if you read the background of the author, you will have a kind of a glimpse to understand what can be the story is all about. Okay, so Jomo Kenyatta, African nationalist leader, he was also the first president of the country Kenya, which comes in Africa, which comes in the African continent, and he had ruled as a president for the years 1964 to 1978. Then Kikuyu. Kikuyu is a name of a personal tribal sect that we had in Africa. Kikuyu, he was one of the earliest and best known African nationalist leader. So more of a nationalist leadership is what something that deals with this man Jomo Kenyatta, like Gandhiji that we have in our India. So he was the man one who's made or one who started so many nationalist movements in the country, in his own country. Okay, then he also has worked as a secretary of his tribal association. Tribal, the moment you think tribal, you should know what does it mean, isn't it? Who are tribals? Tribals are the people one who live probably in the jungles, isn't it? At the same time, they do not have one place to settle down or something. They keep on moving, or if they have, they will be having their own set of land or set of place where they will live. So one tribal is something which they have their own land, which they have their own the way places to where they live, and the tribals are people one who keep on moving from one place to other or something, or generations or something. So, as a secretary of his tribal association in the year 1928, he campaigned for land reform. That is, Jomo Kenyatta performed, or he actually took part, or he campaigned in a lot of land reforms and African political rights. That is, he was the man who worked for the nationalist movement for the country like Africa. At the same time, he is also the person one who has worked for his own tribal people, at the same time fought for the political rights for the African people. This much is given in the text to understand who the man is all about. So Jomo Kenyatta. So when you read this about the author, probably your mind may think some things that are related to the title of the chapter, that is The Gentleman of the Jungle. Hope I am clear. You can follow me. Alright. So let us start The Gentleman of the Jungle by Jomo Kenyatta. So your text, before I could start a text, let us read what is given in the pre-reading activity, so that again it will take you to the title of the chapter. Okay, so the pre-reading activity of this short story is this: narrate a story from the Panchatantra where good prevails over evil. There is only one line of a pre-reading activity has been given to you, and the author is asking us to narrate or to hear the stories of Panchatantra. For an Indian student, Panchatantra, this name or the title is not new. You have been hearing and listening or watching the stories of Panchatantra, where always the stories have a kind of a moral in it, isn't it? So where we have seen that good always defeats the evil at the end. So the author is slowly giving us the hints about what kind of a story are we going to study now, or are we going to read now. Alright, so a story, narrate or hear or listen or see stories from the book Panchatantra, where always these stories have a moral, where always the good prevails over the evil. Okay, a certain kind of a hint has been given here about the text or something here. Okay, now the background to the story is given in the first page itself. Okay, you can see the picture that is given there. So if you carefully observe and analyze the picture, you will come to know that there are animals, isn't it? So you can very clearly see there is an elephant which is sitting probably in a small room or a hut or something like that. Then on the roof of the same hut you can see a crocodile, then you can see a fox, you can see a tiger, isn't it? You can see a leopard, isn't it? And probably you can also see a wild bullock, isn't it? So as we look into this, what we come to know here is that a picture is been given to us in order to understand the background of the story here. Okay, now after looking into the picture, after analyzing it very, very carefully, now let us read what is the background to the story here. The background to the story is, in the late 19th century of chief European powers divided Africa among themselves. Probably I had used this word in some of my explanations, saying that colonization. What do you mean by colonization? A colonization is nothing but a superior power coming onto some different countries and having their rule on the people of the native people. If I have to give you a very lively example, take an example of India. What was India before 200 years ago? 200. We were actually ruled by the so-called Britishers, isn't it? So in your history, you have studied that Britishers came to India and they started ruling on us for many years, and August 15th, 1947 was the day when we got the freedom from these people who came to rule us. We celebrate what? Independence Day, isn't it? So India got independence in the year 1947 on the August 15th of August. You know all these things. So why I use this word colonization is nothing but having a superior power, one who is mighty, one who is very strong, move on to different countries and then start ruling on them. And especially even in a country like India, when it was ruled, there are so many other countries who were or who had the rule of the Britishers, isn't it? So if I have to give you an example, India, all these African countries, isn't it? So there were so many countries which were ruled by the superior power in the form of freedom getting. And in a similar way, a continent like Africa was also invaded by many European powers. This is what you need to understand. So did you understand what's the meaning of the word colonization? Colonization is nothing but the superior power going on to the different countries and setting up their rule on the native people. Native, nothing but the people who belong to their own country, Indians. That is, when Britishers came to us, the Indians were suppressed, isn't it? And they were actually ruled by the Britishers, where the kings, and you know the history, right? So I need not to explain what do you mean by or what have you read about the pre-independent India, isn't it? So even a India, country like India, before its independence, it was ruled by the Britishers. Keep that thing in the mind. In a similar way, even the whole of African country was again ruled unlike India. That is what you got to understand, and understand that word colonization. In the late 19th century, of the chief European powers divided Africa among themselves. Don't you think that even Britishers, when they came to India, they divided the rulers, isn't it? So they themselves divided the different rulers of the own countrymen, or the own Rajas and Maharajas of India who were ruling different parts. They just divide and rule. You might have heard of that phrase, isn't it? Divide and rule was the policy that was, introduced by these Britishers when they came and invaded a country like India. In the similar way, these European powers went to the country like Africa, or the continent like Africa, and they started dividing the African countries amongst themselves. They could do this because European arms were superior, and because the African chiefs did not understand the meaning of the treaties they were asked to sign. I hope if you go back to, or if you remember history properly, there were so many treaties that were signed, isn't it? On the outset, we also have to understand that these Britishers were very intelligent enough, isn't it? So they started coming to different countries, they invaded the countries, and they forced the rulers of that specific countries to sign the treaties where the other person wasn't able to understand what they have signed. isn't it? So if I have to when they invaded a country like India, they started taxing the people there, isn't it? They started taxing the people. So in the similar way, these European powers, when they came to African continent, they started dividing and ruling. At the same time, they started treaties which weren't understood by the native or the local rulers or the countrymen. As a result of Africans lost the lands they had traditionally lived and cultivated. So, since they were not aware of the treaties that were signed, gradually what happened was Africans, that is the native the native people who were living in their own countries, started losing their lands. They started losing the lands, losing a portion of their own country where they lived and they cultivated it. Their attitude towards European expansion is made clear in the following fable. Fable, F-A-B-L-E. Fable is a short story which has the characters in terms of animals, not exactly the human beings. That is what you need to understand. Fable, okay? A fable is a story where you can see that the characters are not the human beings or maybe human beings, but more of animals are used in order to understand or in order to make use of this. So this particular title, The Gentleman of the Jungle, is the attitude towards European expansion. That is, Europeans started expanding their powers. First, they came and occupied only little part of an Africa, something like they did with India, and slowly they started expanding. They slowly started their expansion of the power by signing different treaties or so. In the similar way, the result, the attitude towards European expansion is made very clear in this following. That is, in this title, The Gentleman of the Jungle. It is made very clear how did they started expanding, which reflects the attitude of the Kikuyu people. Kikuyu, this word I had used it while telling you about Jomo Kenyatta, isn't it? So he was the first one who belonged to this particular tribal people, Kikuyu, people of Kenya, toward European laws and commissions. So when these Europeans started invading, even they came to, when they started slowly invading the African country, okay, when they slowly started invading this country, they slowly started expanding their powers. And this story, The Gentleman of the Jungle, is a story about how these Europeans, so to say the Britishers, started expansion with special reference to one of the countries in Africa, that is Kenya. And at the same time, slowly they have started one particular tribal people by name Kikuyu, K-I-K-I-Y-U. K-I-K-U-Y-U. Kikuyu is the name of a particular tribal people who were living in the country like Kenya, and this whole story is about the description where the European powers slowly started expansion. So am I clear with this? So far what we have discussed here is that we have understood what the title is all about. We have discussed certain things about who Jomo Kenyatta was, and we have also discussed about the pre-reading activity of the lesson, that is the have you ever heard or seen or listened to the stories of Panchatantra where good prevails evil? In the similar way, this story is about a country like Kenya, about a specific tribal people like Kikuyu, where they had their own land which was slowly invaded by the Britishers. The story is about this particular aspect of the story that happened in Africa before it was before it was unified, or before, the pre-African country, in the year or in the 19th century, when these European people started expanding their powers by reaching different countries of the world. isn't it? They started going to each and every corner of the world, and then they started their expansion in the form of colonizing the country, colonization, isn't it? In the form of colonizing the country. So what we think here is that one should always know that these Britishers, who had a lot of money, power and intelligence, they slowly started spreading across the world and started invading and taking away the land, the wealth, isn't it? The land that was there, the wealth that was there from the native people of those specific countries, isn't it? So what we need to understand here is that we are going to see in this short story, The Gentleman of the Jungle, same European powers, they invaded a country like Africa, or a continent like Africa, in which they invaded country by name Kenya, in which slowly they started targeting on one of the tribals that this Kenya had, was the Kikuyu tribal people. Now, why am I telling you this is because Jomo Kenyatta was himself a man belonging to the Kikuyu family, isn't it? So he was a man, one who belonged to the same family. So when they started having their rules on them, that is, when European people started introducing their own rules and regulations in their own land, he was the one who started working as a, what did he work for? He worked as a nationalist leader, isn't it? He worked for the land reforms. Jomo Kenyatta, isn't it? So he worked for the land reforms, and one more word that was used was, he also worked for the political rights of the African people, isn't it? He was the one who started working against the Britishers. So in an Indian scenario, if you take an example, our father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhiji, will definitely come into your mind there, isn't it? In the similar way, Jomo Kenyatta was one who started reforming against the British rule or against the European culture or something. So, having said that, let us understand that the first unit of your lesson, the Gentleman of the Jungle, is actually a fable, F-A-B-L-E. A fable is nothing but a short story where normally the characters will not be human beings, but maybe they will be the animals or something. Okay, now can you just go back to the picture that we discussed before coming on to the background of the story? So what all the animals that we saw on the picture, isn't it? So have those things ready in your mind and understand this background very well, so that tomorrow, let me straight away start the story, The Gentleman of the Jungle. So I plausibly presume the fact that whatever we have discussed so far with respect to the first unit from your reflection textbook is there in your mind. So you can just be ready. I mean, you can just read the lesson once, the short story once, and be ready for the discussion when I start discussing with line by line or word to word, as it is a non-interactive class. So here I am only the speaker, where you will be just watching me on the screen and taking the things into consideration. And of course, yes, once we are back to the normal situation, once you are back to the classes or something, we can certainly have a discussion on what the story is all about. So as for now, what you need to understand here is about the title, about the author, and whatever the background that I have given to you to the story, and be ready. And if you find time, you can read the whole lesson also today only, and be ready for tomorrow for the discussion. Hope whatever was discussed is clear. You have understood everything. I hope you can follow me, all right, and read the lesson. Just read it once, twice, thrice, no problem. You just read it once on your own, and tomorrow when I start the class, we will have a discussion on that. Clear? Thank you very much.